Hello, Mike. Happy Friday.
Jack, happy Friday to you as well. What's new? Oh, not what's new. Uh, I think we just spoke that once upon a time our discussions were baked into articles because I was trying
Mm,
to learn to write.
mm,
Jury's out. But then sooner or later we became disconnected, but then somehow or another the topics always, I guess, remain similar in this AI realm. Anyway, so you were
yeah.
just saying how you had read, I think, a little bit of what I was talking about last week, which to me, if I can say this right, it's the myth of linearity is the myth, right? Like that somehow,
Mm,
because we went to the moon, we will now go to Alpha Centauri, right? Like nothing ever gets in the
mm,
way. Pardon me. I think it's funny because I just heard that from Kitty Hawk, the first plane flight to commercial air travel was, I think, around 50 years. And then 10 years after that was moon landing. So when
yeah.
you think of that acceleration from nothing to practically everything, I guess, right? That
Mm,
not only could we just get off the ground, but we could get to the moon, which, it's not like it's not there, right?
yeah.
Fascinating.
And
But
it
the
would
same
be
thing is we
interesting.
never went anywhere else. That was the point. Like there isn't any more worlds to conquer except maybe imagined ones. But go ahead. I mean, I'm always
Yeah, that is kind of like a maybe off the cuff comment a little bit, but it's kind of fascinating to think what the accelerant was for the aerospace industry to get from basically, barely flying to going to the moon. And perhaps that
I
accelerant.
know the answer. Oh,
Yeah,
do you want
okay,
to know?
all right. Yeah, go ahead.
Insane amounts of energy. Apparently, that is the whole reason we're here, is that we've exploited everything on Earth to get massive amounts of energy. And because everything we do costs energy, energy
Mm,
has to be cheap. And back then, energy was really inefficient when you think about it. Like oil wasn't a lot. I mean, they had early automobiles, but you see what I mean? Like we started
mm,
to learn, oh, all that crap in the ground is really useful. Seriously, right? In around
mm.
the late turn of the century. So it just took so long to kind of figure out how to keep uh, maximizing that. Even though this is a finite, it used to be that you'd poke a hole in the ground and oil would come out. Good old
Mm.
days, right? And
Well,
now it's much different, but maybe you can contradict me if you want. Certainly takes a lot of energy to go to the moon. Pretty positive, right?
yeah, so that was an extremely elegant answer, like of the discussion about AI, scruffy versus neat, right? So
Hmm.
you were very neat, right? So that was a very elegant answer, right? I think I am a little bit more scruffy, in my kind of interpretation of why going to the moon was possible, and in
Oh,
my opinion,
please.
the accelerant was the political competition with the opposing political bloc. Right? Maybe we are seeing this a little bit right now, right? Oh,
Yeah,
let's do
sure.
something, in NASA because Chinese might kind of take over the moon or something. But yeah, it's a very interesting thing to see, how that accelerant kind of worked, and for basically 10 years of kind of research and development, you know, basically the space program was created, and with with a few kind of like nameless engineers, maybe legions of them, maybe actually,
Yeah.
that kind of contributed enormously to that program, and programmers and material science and all that. And then there was the astronauts, right? I mean,
Hmm.
there was strong, that kind of like was a, kind of, and a few others, like John Young, that were kind of able to basically facing almost certain death, right? They were able to function very highly, right? They were able to kind of like solve, very complex problems in orbit, facing, really kind of, dire dangers. So yeah, so that kind of like this machinery kind of worked. So in a way, right?
Yeah.
In a way, as a system, that system had superpowers, right? Something that you are trying to kind of discuss in your paper, right? Like the system, the combination of the political accelerants, right? The combination of the funds being available, the combination of, the people being there, right? The combination of, the engineers that, maybe not a very glorious kind of like origins, like a lot of, German after World War II, right? Where a lot of German engineers were kind of transplanted here, right? Maybe not necessarily kind of stellar resumes, these guys had, right? But as a whole, right, the system had a superpower, right? Was able to create a solution to a very
Sure.
hard problem.
And let me just agree wholeheartedly. What I think is interesting, and this could be really our topic for this week, because I actually need help with this, is that I'm looking to you. I gave, what was the word, energy, right? That's, I guess, glib at best. But remember the bomb. Like the bomb, if it wasn't for the bomb, we wouldn't go to the moon. Let's put it that way. Because the bomb meant that instead of continually fight more wars, we then suddenly had this, oh, wow, we can't continue to fight wars. And that led to this stalemate, right, which went on after World War II, which became the space race, right? Because here is this, so-called country, whatever, this country that's going to dominate the rest of history in their minds, and we are somehow opposed to that country. We want to dominate the rest of history in our minds, and somehow the motive means, you see what I mean? Like you still have to have the motive and the means there, which were very, I think, unusual, right? Because 69, I guess it was 60s, really, we started to get the Mercury program into gear, and also the winning of the war on our side led to a ton of prosperity, never to be matched again. I'm never sure what happened in Russia, because certainly they did not have a great end of the war, and the war was truly awful on their side, and I wish I knew more about why things went the way they did, right? I'm certain something about post-war um, not being able to take over Germany probably made them mad. I don't know. I wish I knew more about World War II, but it certainly was not, it motivated them to also compete in this way that was non-militaristic, but it was kind of still a pseudo-militarism. Sorry, do you see what I mean? Like it's all these
Yeah.
precursors that give context to the fact that we could do it, even though we, as you mentioned, probably couldn't do it. But whenever you tell people they can't do something, they manage to in some
Yeah.
great way. I mean, right? And
Yeah.
also, I
Yeah.
guess, truly rocketry in World War II was huge. It was a huge investment as well. So you'd have, in a sense, some mental capital. Why I think, by the way, we could only have generative AI now. Even if you knew what it was before, you didn't have the ability to do anything with it, right? Like it wouldn't
Mm.
work without huge model training corpuses, right? It wouldn't work without kind of the ubiquitous aspect of 2023 almost, or 2022 technology had to exist for generative AI to exist. And you can argue me on that one if you want. I'm making that up.
No. I think that the reasons for the economic and technological and societal inefficiencies, to put it mildly,
Mm-hmm.
in the Soviet bloc, kind of would feel probably like several, sessions like that. But the fact remains that the inefficiency were very severe.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of leadership problems and all that stuff. So yeah.
But
Uh,
Sputnik, right? They did it. They got Sputnik up there, and that, was it. However they managed to do that, that set the
yeah,
tone.
and I agree that the nuclear physics and the successes, with the nuclear weapon creation, quote unquote successes, right, kind of like contributed, right, to the change of dynamics, right. So I the Russians, the Soviets and everybody else kind of understood the mutual assured extraction, mutual assured destruction, principle, right? So everybody was very clear about that. And but so the competition plane kind of changed, right? So there was a space program, obviously, like to your point, right? Enormously competitive area was the sports, right? The Olympics, the athletics, the weightlifting, and all those kind of like sports that now become, the arena of competition between the Western Bloc and the Eastern Bloc, right? So it was tremendously important, right? But maybe it was kind of in a way much safer, much healthier kind of like plane of competition, right? So yeah, so in a way, yeah, I think you're right. I mean, the nuclear physics, the successes there kind of contributed to maybe calming down, or maybe suppressed conflicts, while still, fueling enormously spending on the military kind of like expenditures. But yeah, you're right.
Well, and all I mean is this particular ability to go backwards is part of my challenge right now, which is that you can understand something based on the decisions that you could make at the time, right? Like just like me going to the grocery store, like whatever's on sale is what I'll buy, or something like that. Like, and my wife is very much the opposite. She wants to make a recipe, so she will get the items in the recipe regardless of cost. And what I kind of point out is that, well, one is much more room for error, right? You're getting something that's maybe seasonal or blah, blah, whatever happens to do with something being cheaper. And then you figure out what to make with it, right? That's the fun part for me is, okay, what kind of recipe can I derive from this, or find one that fits the ingredients. The other is I need the ingredients and then I can make this recipe, even though technically you don't know why you'd make the recipe. You don't know why what did this person know that you didn't? Why is it that they always seem to have tarragon, and I never have tarragon, but it's $3 for a little thing of tarragon and they seem to have it and required in the recipe. So I guess what I'm saying is this is like a different point of view that I'm trying to model, which is maybe, hey, we have this, and this at hand. Let's go to the moon. They don't sit there and think, God, thankfully we have all the money that we need, and we have the government support, and we have the Senate, and we have, we're not, even though I believe we were at war with Vietnam, you know what I mean? Like we somehow have the sociological stability and the desire to do this to demonstrate our technical abilities. And I think the same thing happens now. Maybe we'll just move it to now, since I was a little kid then. But now we're talking the same supremacy in AI computing, and even now as I'm sending pretty massive amounts of tokens through ChatGPT, I'm still pretty amazed. Like this is an interesting energy expenditure here, right? Like for nothing, because I'm on an unpaid plan I used to pay. We are still doing the space race. Does that make sense? Or if you wish, you were talking about super computing, why it's not super is it really is just an architectural shift, because things do tap out, right? Like you end the ability to be able to create. So now you've got to change your architecture to create new things. And that can either be a setback or, you know what I mean? Like you have to ramp up again, but it's more exciting to ramp up than it is to become obsolete to everybody, including finance, right? Nobody wants to be like, hey, it's fine that Bank of America doesn't make money, right? Like you do something worthwhile, that's fine. No, you always need to grow, or else the world ends. I don't know. We could go into why, but do you see what I mean? Like AI has to get more and more powerful, even though I think the architecture is actually, I think it's saturated. I think it can't really get much better without new architectures, which could be, like MCP or, you see what I mean? And you're into that too, right? Like, yeah, it's already good. In fact, I need lighter weight models because my computer is not that good. But the lightweight models are really good at many things, right? That's why then you have to kind of figure a new recipe. Boy, metaphorically, I tied it all together, right, Jack?
Yeah, and even more surprisingly, you and your pal Elon Musk basically are saying the same thing, right? So Elon is basically saying that, hey, I mean, we're running out of training data, right? I mean, what can you do? I mean, it's AI is going
Yeah.
to be eating its own tail, so there is a change that is necessary maybe through synthetic data sets. Um, which, right? So
You
now if
saw
we
a little bit
think,
about that one. Sure. No, go ahead.
which, if what does it mean, right? I mean, we ran out of data, right? So what does it really mean? Well, it means that you have to create new data. How do you create this new data? Well, it would be nice to have that new data, synthetic data that now it's going to be feeding the AIs to be kind of useful, right? Kind of like maybe not a regurgitation, but kind of like an enhancement, right? So that's kind of exactly what's going on right now, and I'm of the same opinion. I'm, but I think it's important maybe to mention the kind of the architectures, right? So there is like two types of architectures. Like there is system one that we are kind of talking about, and then there's system two. So system one is kind of like you and I and Elon, we kind of agree, the three of us, that we are kind of reaching the limit, right? Like
And
the
we're not
large
paid
language
by
models.
Elon yet, by the way, just
No,
so people know. Yeah.
not yet.
Okay.
But if he wants to contribute,
Sponsored. We could be sponsored
yeah,
by Elon. It would be fine.
yeah, we wouldn't object, right? Um, so system one is basically kind of like you are asking a question
Hmm.
and the AI answers, right,
Hmm.
with its own like, internal or external knowledge. Now, the same AI can be used in a different way as a processing
By
kind
the
of
way, a
engine.
really serious prompt intermediary, just to let you know, it isn't the
Uh,
model and you talking. Keep going, right?
Yeah, so system two is kind of something that would be probably the next thing, next big thing, and that's kind of like what I'm implementing in my work,
Hmm.
which is that the AI, the LLMs is just a processing kernel, right, of the existing AI cognitive or reasoning algorithms that have been researched for many decades and
Hmm.
now can be executed by that AI, right? So we don't need to necessarily have stronger AI trained on more data. We can just kind of like use those algorithmic principles and kind of show them to the AI and say, hey, execute that, right? Build the plan, right, in the AI style, right, or build the kind of reasoning process using maybe logic, right, maybe
Sure.
non-monotonic logic, maybe model logic, and kind of use AI that way, and you will see that you will turbocharge your AI over, let's say, everything that is right now kind of available at the top line levels. So yeah, I think that there is quite a bit of headway in the direction where we kind of start looking at other things in AI, not just large language models.
Well, you certainly brought up quite a few things that I'm not completely that familiar with, right? Which is in terms of what I do know about synthetic data because I do have this theory, which is, of course, synthetic data usually doesn't do what real data does, which is to be very weird. You know what I mean?
Mm.
Like, because people, if we have people involved, it's fine. If you're just dealing with maybe molecules and how they behave, I think you're safe. Like, they don't have a personality, but they do have rules. So it's fine, I guess. But even the protein folding, I call bullshit on that because I'm like, folding a protein is extremely difficult to do, right? Knowing what you could build doesn't give you the ability to build it, right? Like, and I'm playing a game right now, and I like games because like chess, someone's going to win because the rules are set up so that somebody can win. I mean, once in a while you have a draw, which is almost probably the weirdest thing in chess, if you think about it, right? That it doesn't mean you're equal. It just means things just didn't quite work. You know what I mean? When you've played to a draw, like you should have
Mm.
won one of the persons, but they screwed up something along the way, right? Like, anyway, but that's life. And you shouldn't have draws. And any game, pardon me, like the one I'm playing, it's challenging because I know I can achieve it because the person who designed it allowed it to be achievable. And that's my fear of anything to do with synthetic data is it'll just game its own system, right?
Mm.
Because how could it not? it can't go out. I mean, it's still pardon me, still rational, even with LLM's noise. My hope and what I was trying to get at, although no one really seemed to care, was the energy expenditure, because we will continue to ramp up energy to meet bigger and bigger and bigger token windows, right? Or just the sheer increase in usage will have its own repercussions. And we've been through this. It created AWS. It created, you know what I mean? I don't know how Google manages half this stuff, but it took 15 years of screwing around to figure out how to scale. You know what I mean? Like, and now that, oh, great, we can scale easily. Good stuff, because any engineer involved in scaling are like the old moon mission people. Like, you had no idea what you're doing, no idea how to get there, right? Like, figure it out. And they, you know, that kind of work to me is enormously appealing for a human, because somehow we can manage complete unknowns easier than a computer can.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
anyway, fear of computers figuring out computer problems. My hope was this idea of energy expenditure going down, because I think analog computers, honestly, my very first science project, I think it was fourth grade, was a computer, two computers, a digital and an analog computer that I built. And anyway, I have a thing. I even have I got an A, or actually I went to the local science fair because it was good, you know, the winner of, and then I think they gave me first place. But anyway, it was way before its time. But I built an analog computer, even though I don't know how I did it. I looked it up in a book, right? Like, I don't know anything. But now I'm like, well, weird thing about analog computing is that it's already has built-in noise, right? So it actually doesn't need a ones and zeros translation layer. Like, it actually can compute in real time. Now, can you run an LLM on it? Apparently somebody did, and it was in Nature. So go figure how that's even possible, right? But can you can you use our new branching logic? Because then I would trust it. Actually, I'd trust an analog computer could come up with something really unexpected. You see what I mean? Because it's almost inherent in its wave function, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, the probabilistic systems like neural networks have the same capability, right? I mean, that's the nature of the distribution, right? I mean, you can, you know, modify the temperature of your, you know, large language model.
Oh, no,
and kind
they're
of make
great
it,
now, but they use energy, is what I'm saying. They use a lot of energy, and, you know, toaster-sized energy, right? Like, it isn't trivial, but it does work perfectly. You're absolutely right. I'm just saying it's great. I love it, but energy is a thing.
Yeah, and coming back to the synthetic data, right? I mean, kind of maybe expand a little bit on it, right? So we are kind of quite familiar with the synthetic data already, right? Like, for example, the business of writing novels, and then those novels being translated into other languages. Right? The content is the same. It's the same semantics, right? So it's just, you know, having novel in English and a novel in German or Spanish, right? So in a way, the translation is kind of like a synthetic data, right? It's not necessarily contributes anything semantically new. It's still the same characters doing the same thing, having the same dialogues. The plot is the same, right? So you might have some other linguistic constructs in it, but, you know, fundamentally it's this. So a translation is a synthetic version of the original, right? So is that a useful thing for today's AI? You can make an argument that it is indeed a useful thing, because if you have a very large input window, it is often useful for the AI to kind of repeat the pattern, right? Like, hey, you know, here's a very long piece of text that is supposed to be context, right? And neural networks that constitute the large language models kind of benefit from maybe repeating that pattern, like repeating the task description and then repeating that pattern. That pattern can be repeated, you know, as a translation, right? So in a way, synthetic data enhances the capability of an AI to come up with something useful, maybe something quote unquote super, as you call it in your paper, right? So yeah, so the synthetic data, it's kind of better for the synthetic data to have like new things in it, like an extension, like an enhancement. But it's also sometimes useful to simply repeat the pattern to kind of give the AI a better, I guess, quote unquote, focus when problem solving.
I mean, you certainly are making sense. I guess it's my Dennis Hassabis.
Mm-hmm.
I get mad at this guy for some reason, right? Because it's sort of like him and Jeffrey Hinton and stuff like that. Like it's sort of this thing of like, hey, we really had this crazy thing happen. Nobody predicted, including you, who's been in the field for 20 years, right? It just was like almost wild. And suddenly incredible things, right? We have this whole new capability that we never knew as humans, right? So it's mind-blowing that it's sort of like we invented the money system and suddenly it's like, wow, all the money now goes to like 10 people. Who would have imagined, since money is only useful when it's being, you know what I mean? It's sort of this, it's like what happens, the extrapolation of any well-meaning or non-well-meaning system, right? Like, hey, we need these things in order to protect these things, or we need to go to the moon to show basically the Russians that we're the best and don't even bother. You know what I mean? Like, what you're no good and we're really good. I saw this actual survey, and only because there's one outlier, right? And I'm going to get to the point. This is a big point, right? When you're reading things like surveys, how do we interpret it? But there's one big outlier, which happened to do with the statement of which do you agree with? And the statement was, America is the greatest place ever, I think was statement number one. America, along with other countries, are great, I guess. And then I think the third one was America sucks or something like that. I don't know. Whatever that range is, I guess was interesting because one particular group who identified themselves as Republicans were very strong with the America is great part, not so hot on the America and other countries are great. Whereas everybody else was kind of evenly distributed, right? Like it wasn't a plurality in any other way, which is interesting because I think that's interesting, right? Like that just a word or a concept like that changes someone's opinion. And I guess I'm going to bring up Nabokov for crying out loud, because he could write in every language, but chose to write some of his stories in English, right? Like he didn't need to translate, but he also, just like Lem, wrote in Polish, but I've only read him in English. And that was translated by a person, and maybe even him, because he might speak English well enough. I just mean translation. Yes, if you can get the plot across, you can get the driving directions, but I wouldn't read a novel translated by Google, because A, it would probably be weird, even though it'd be accurate. You have to translate to the person's culture, right? Like, I'm sure there's great Indian stories about gods and whatever, or even our own Greek mythology or whatever, but it doesn't mean much to me, although I can get it, like I can sort of get Hamlet or something. You see what I mean? But I'm very disconnected from that culture. But I can appreciate a good fight and a person bitching about their life. You know what I mean? Like I can identify with a character even if I'm not in their culture. But that's why I think maybe your translation thing, did I get that wrong? Sorry, Jack. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I don't think computers can translate per se.
Well, so yeah, so the field of machine translation in AI was very strong for several decades. So so essentially, the approach was always the Rosetta Stone approach, where we were training parallel texts, where to your point, probably original and a very good translation, probably kind of like maybe devoted of the cultural flavors, but really kind of like a grammatical kind of like accuracy was in the grammar and the usage of kind of
Yes,
words, right? So
accuracy,
that,
no problem. Yes, I have
yeah,
no compunction that we could do accuracy. What I mean
yeah.
is when people speak Russian and in Russio idioms, we perceive it as being hostile or whatever. You see what I mean? Like it's
Mhm.
really, are you persuasive in your language to another person who speaks in another language? And that would be more interesting, right? Not even persuasive, but like entertaining. Like, hey, wow, I love reading this. I love Stanislaw Lem, but I can't read Polish.
Mhm.
But I'm assuming he's the same kind of writer in Polish. You know what I mean? As he is in English. He's kind of funny. He's kind of this. He's the
Yeah.
same author, but the words might be different.
Yeah, so Lem is something that very close. He's the author is very close to my heart. So to kind of maybe answer your question
Yeah.
actually directly, I think I've read everything that Lem wrote in Polish and in English. I mean side by side, because at that time I was just learning the language. So one of the ways to learn the language was to kind of read it
Hey,
kind of
I did
sentence
that with
by sentence.
Doraemon. In
Yeah.
Japanese, Doraemon, anyone? Anyone know? Anyway, keep going. You're
Yeah, so
smarter than
so
me.
what I've noticed, and obviously English is not my native language, so I cannot really speak too much about the quality, to the quality or the literature kind of qualities, in it. But the translations were always very close. So
Okay.
idiomatic, expressions, obviously like that, and also other language that I was learning similar way, like for example, Polish to German, that kind of thing. Always the translations were very close, with a
Okay.
few exceptions. Uh, so AI, even before the current, generative AI, as a field, was always had robust algorithms that were translating really well, between languages. So in a way, this is kind of like maybe, yeah, that layer, that cultural layer, that maybe is an enhancement. That's probably something that was not really implemented well, but maybe current generative AI would be kind of able to do that. But yeah, I think translation is essentially a kind of we are lucky, right? The linguistic patterns in English and in any other language is something that is very kind of like. Um, very compatible with the computation methods that we have currently, right? The grammar, the kind of the synonyms, the antonyms, the metonyms, all those relationship between words can be captured very well by the AI for decades now, and kind of
Hmm.
used there. So that's why perhaps the super intelligence maybe is going to happen sooner rather than later, because AI was always able to do that deep insight into languages. And if natural languages are the languages of intelligence, I think that is kind of like going to be a natural progression to kind of go in that direction.
Yeah, I can tell you just like you're like digging a little. Well, I will tell you, and I don't know if you know, but one of my articles was translated into Japanese, which I found
Mhm.
interesting because I wrote a little introduction for that. I actually used Google Translate to translate it, and it was kind of not word for word, but it tonally was correct, right? Like,
Okay.
and weird because I didn't write this Japanese, or I'm sorry, I didn't write this article like a Japanese person would write this article. Do you see what I mean?
Mhm.
Like, I
Mhm.
lived in Japan, and culturally, you do not convince people by being a loudmouth, bombastic person like I tend to be in my writings and maybe even in real life, right? Like, you don't. That's not their way at all. Like, you wouldn't be persuasive. It might be interesting. Like I like to read Lamb, or I like to read Russian books. By the way, Russians apparently sensibility always I like quite a bit, right? Whereas maybe other languages, even when translated, don't connect with me as much. Japanese is harder for me because it's not it's very subtle, I guess is the best way to put it. It's why German used to be really good for scientific work, because their language kind of suited some more exact qualities to it. I guess what I'm saying is that as you you're not really getting anywhere when you translate, though, because some languages are better at conveying XYZ. All I know is, like, our language was just a weird conglomeration of trends and accidents. And actually, I think most of our language was because somebody decided to write a dictionary once. That's why we have a language, like, otherwise we would all be speaking in patois, right? We would all have our own local languages, which are fine. And we would understand each other because that was what suited us. To have a lingua franca, which, by the way, I looked that up. Did you know lingua franca isn't really about French? It was a term, and I'm going to forget. And this is okay. So this is my biggest problem and why I need your help. But I did learn, and anyone out there, look it up. It doesn't mean French was the language. It was about what was the language we were going to speak. God, now I forgot the story. See? So I'm reading a book. Have you ever heard of the book Super Forecasting? Have I mentioned this before?
Yes, you mentioned it. Yeah.
Okay, so you've heard of it only from me, but it's fine,
Yes.
because it's a book about predictions, which I think is a big part of our narrative, and maybe the narrative about AI, right? Or even the narrative about the future. Who knows, right? We're always trying to predict the future. My story that we talked about a little was about, you can never, everything's up and down, right? It's not ever this way. And just because computers managed the Moore's law for a while, I think in most people's mind, they see it demonstrated that computers are more powerful than ever, will continue to be more powerful, when actually they kind of end up normalizing a little bit. They don't become that much better to most people. And you're working in industry now, and I'm working in academia. Believe me, people barely know how to make videos. Sorry. Like, come on, guys. Like, we've had this capability for how long, and people don't realize that they don't need to write a manifesto anymore. You just record it on your phone, and then you put it out on YouTube. Versus TikTok is a bigger problem to me, because I like this format, the horizontal format. I don't like the portrait format. But kids nowadays never look at anything except in portrait format. So you're automatically terrible. Left swipe. Oh, anyway, long story short, the mediums change. Which could be a meta commentary on your concept. I mean, you see what I mean? Is like, language is nothing. It's medium, and receptivity is actually the problem. That you could be sitting there writing your Unabomber manifesto, but we all have gone to the world of TikTok. So we're not even going to read it or care. So I think superintelligence automatically gets thrown out because there's going to be another medium. That's all. It's like, it will always evolve as we discard old platforms and bring in new, right? Or just, we all used to watch the evening news. I just asked Elizabeth, like, who's watched the evening news at 10? I haven't for 20, 30 years or more, but it still exists for somebody, right? Sorry, there was a lot to unpack, but I'll get to my problem in a minute.
Just to finish your thought about super forecasting, the book, right? Yeah. So Stanislav Lem has an equivalent of that book. It's called Summa Technologia, kind of the Latin spelling of right? And he always considered that book to be the most important book that he wrote. He never considered himself to be a sci-fi writer. Even though Solaris and a few other
Perks
books
the Pilot were, come on. Anyway.
Yeah, Perks the Pilot was fantastic also, but he always considered Summa Technologia to be his most important work, and it is still relevant. It is basically kind of describing the trajectories of certain technologies as they progress, including AI. And I probably read this book 20 times when I was in college, and I think it's kind of formed me a little bit, but yeah. So I think we can we can kind of think about, you know, the so the funny thing about, you know, like, let's say going back to the Apollo program, right? Like, you know, so superintelligence might kind of have the same face, you know, or evening news, right? So like, hey, you know, it kind of becomes, you know, like everyday story. So people stopped watching, you know, Apollo landings after the second one because, oh, you know, what can happen? You know, another spaceship is landing on the moon. You know, let's watch something else, right? So the superintelligence
It
might be like
literally
that as well.
happened with Apollo 13, right? Like,
Yeah,
people just
yeah.
didn't care.
Yeah, people didn't care and actually complained that, you know, they were showing the, you know, they were showing the landings instead of, you know, like maybe some sitcom shows or something, whatever, right? So so AI, right? So super intelligence might be kind of like facing the same problem, right? It's going to be embedded maybe in some appliances, and our fridge might have like a little display, and it's going to kind of tell us exactly what's the healthiest food, and it's going to make us live longer. But I'm just gonna say, oh, okay, well, the you know, the robot is going to maybe save, robots will save people's lives. Maybe, you know, self-driving cars will be kind of like extremely safe, but, you know, it's kind of going to become, okay, well, you know, it's just another tool, like the pliers in your drawer.
Well, that's why if we lived with Stephen Hawking, we're not getting any smarter. That's the problem, right? He's only within a narrow band. At least AI might be more, I don't know, not well read, but you see more generic, right? Like, I will tell you, as an example, you can laugh. I needed to replace my thermostat, my old super thermostat, my smart thermostat, my Nest thermostat, you know, started to complain. It's like, hey, we're not going to support that anymore, says Google. We bought this company a while back, and now you can't control it anymore or something. So I'm like, you know what I mean? Like, obsolescence. Give me a break. It's a thermostat. But I'm an idiot, as you can tell. So I said, okay, I'll upgrade, and upgrading was not super expensive, but still I'm kind of you know, it's kind of mad. But I'm like, well, maybe it'll be cooler, right? Like, whatever a thermostat could be. Get the box. It's got the Apple thing, right? Nothing's in it, just this glowing orb kind of deal, right? Like, and then there's a tiny little instruction book, and then there's a very dense instruction book, which I guess is "Don't sue us" or something. So open up the instruction book. It says, open up your phone and go to Google Home, and it'll guide you through everything after you scan the QR code. So it's not funny, but it took me 10 minutes to figure this out, right? And in fact, I'm going over to Perplexity because I like AI help. And I said, here's a picture of my thermostat. I need to put in this thermostat. Like, I'm using it as sort of a guidance throughout this process. So I'll get to why Perplexity comes in handy. But I ended up like, I'm so tired of this. Perplexity, where's this QR code? And they're like, it's on the back of the thermostat. And as a designer, I'm like, didn't you guys ever think of saying, look on the back of the thermostat and put the code in? You see what I mean? Like, it could have been instruction number one. Instead, it just said scan the QR code, which left, talk about translation, by the way. I mean, that's why IKEA instructions aren't in any language, because there's no way, right, to convey information to another person. So screw super intelligence. You see what I mean? Like, you still have to contextualize it to the person, which is almost impossible because we're all very unique. That's my thing. So no such thing as, hey, I've got the answer, because there is no answer. Everyone's different. Either way, I went back. What was funny, and I can wrap this up really quick, is that there's all these little wires. They all have labels on them. There's a whole lot of complexity to the system. But after using Perplexity, I kept, like, all my labels fell off when I tried to put them through. You know, like, literally everything went wrong. But when I went to Perplexity, I kept saying, like, okay, now my two red wires both lost which one they were to. And thankfully, it was like, well, this is probably this one, and this is probably this one, and it was right. And the point being, it was interesting to have this helper. Wasn't super intelligent, right? But it was just contextually relevant that it knew enough about my problem and I could come to it when I reached these are the points of the people would just say, I'm never going to do this. I'm just going to hire somebody, right?
Mm.
This thing's expensive, whatever these persons are, they're $300 and indeed they have experience. I'm just weird that way that I think I can plug wires in, but even at the very end, I realize there's one wire that broke. So then I got to go to Perplexity. I'm like, I can't strip this wire. I can't like make this wire work. And it's like, well, it'll sort of work without it. Right? Like, it's one of those like very fringe pieces of advice that wouldn't be in the manual, right? Like they wouldn't have these weird reality escape clauses, but I do know that it did show me it was nice enough because it does guide you through it on your phone, which is ridiculous that that's the new manual. Or not ridiculous, it's part of actually what I need your help with. But everything is so contextual. Do you see what I mean? You can't write a manual anymore because every situation would change, but thankfully they designed through that. And one thing that was really great is there was one, it shows you what is making contact. And it just turned out that I had plugged one in thing and it wasn't making contact. So I could jiggle it or whatever and then see that it made contact, which by the way, pro move, right? Because guess how infuriating it is to have something not work, right?
Mm.
Like
Yeah.
debugging is a million times harder than writing code. Anyway, sorry, really long, but do you see that as being relevant to our discussion? I hope it was. I don't know. I thought it
Yeah,
was funny.
just to kind of add to your problem, right? If you knew how expensive it would be, that if you kind of like connect the wrong wires together and maybe you shorten your system, it would add another layer of pressure to your
Oh
aggravation.
no, I was a wreck. Trust me. I mean, I was a nervous wreck because it's like operating on a person who's dying. I'm like, I have no idea. I think blood is bad. I
Mm.
think you see it in the movies all the time where people are like, oh, I'll just sew that up. And I'm like, anyway,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
the narrative versus the reality, which might be why supercomputers can't exist, because reality is extremely challenging, whereas talking about it is just fun. Right? I mean, we can
Mm.
we can we can make up whatever stories we want, but when we're faced with adversity, all bets are off, right? That's the thing. Like you don't know how you'll act. Even though you might read tons of stories, I always think the fun thing about space travel is, it's really boring. And so we invent hypersleep in order to just deal with the narrative problem of being cooped up and eating a lot of food for years and losing all of your body mass. And you know what I mean? Like you'd be a wreck without any gravitation, but we just kind of ride around that. And we also ride around not having gravity. And you see what I mean? Like Star Trek, they don't float around and shit. They stand around and point at each other. You see what I mean? It's just a narrative trope there in space, which I accept because that's just a narrative trope. It's fun, right? It's a
Mm.
mirror to reality that isn't really reality. But I think sometimes we confuse it. This is where we get a lot of, speaking of communication, we get a lot of people talking about fake videos, things like that. And I'm like, well, yeah,
Mm.
but let's just say all videos are fake. So what, right? Like you still have to interpret and act upon the information. So there you go. You're a human. Go figure that out. That's the problem with being human, right? We don't have to. By the way, you and I both. I'm a more of a Umberto Eco guy, but we're in the same boat, right? Like it's like, hey, these are these people who were really good at writing, who inspired us both because they helped us think about things we didn't normally think about, but we had to read them many, many times because we're not good at remembering things and
Mm.
applying things, right? So I'm
Yeah.
still giving super intelligent AI, it's still down there in terms of super intelligent acting when you need to act in a good way that helps society or anybody other than yourself, right? Like, you know, the this is like carrying the Bible around with you does not make you a nice person. Sorry. Bible
Yeah.
toting people, but you
Yeah.
see what I mean? You have to be a nice person. The advice that you are given isn't how you behave. So therefore, again, computers talking about stuff, great, right? It knew my wires, like, I mean, I love it, right? But I have to give it a ton of context. So if I can, I know I've buried this lead. So and maybe the next time we can talk about this, and I apologize for dominating. I don't mean to, Jack. But my trouble is that I'm developing the class. This class is about taking data and prompting it using a RAG system, right? So you're analyzing some data. And what I first do is supercomputing, or I'm sorry, super forecasting is the book, because what it tells you is that, like, you don't know anything, good luck, right? So you learn that we're all really fallible, and that numeric representations of ideas are fallible, and that you have to craft narratives, blah, blah, blah. So you're going to craft a narrative using Notebook LM based on some data. And then you've got to craft that into a story, right? A story that could influence somebody. And my goal is to develop what I feel like might be the first sort of narrative dashboard model, right? So the dashboard model is that you look at a bunch of gauges and it tells you something and whatever. And whenever anything goes wrong, the gauge goes up. But these are all lagging indicators, and that's why our economy systems are ridiculous, right? Because lagging indicators don't tell you what to do. They just told you you did something wrong, and then you fire a bunch of people and whatever, hilarity ensues. Sorry. But here's this narrative, and what I want to prove to them is, as you add more context to the narrative, it can change. So I guess why I'm asking is, I think RAG can do this, right? And I think it's the tool to do this, but I've never done it before. So maybe what I'm saying is, this is almost your super intelligence, right? Can I tell you a story about something that you have control over that can change based on new data that you either invoke or whatever? Like, if I had my watch here and it said, you won't get paid unless you exercise 30 minutes today, right? So I would immediately take off my watch and I'd put it on a string and I'd go like that. You see what I mean? Like, you'd cheat, that's the thing. We're not perfect, right? We figure out ways to game systems. Sorry. My hope is that the students can kind of experience this idea of this oracle, right? And it's kind of an oracle, right? It is taking in however much data, quantitative, qualitative, producing a story like it. So-and-so Polish national citizens in Chicagoland are deeply depressed. Sorry, made that up. But you see what I mean, right? And then you look at this every day as part of your fact sheet, right? You'd be like, oh, wow, this is the fact sheet, right? This wasn't created by me. I'm worried about Jack. I'm going to put this on your desk so that you know that Jack needs he definitely needs to be paid more, right? Like, isn't paid enough. How's that? Polish immigrants in the greater Chicagoland area are underpaid. There you go. So this as a fact. And then one day it says, Polish immigrants in America are deeply satisfied. So you would be like, wow, I wonder what just changed. Did Jack get a raise? What I'm trying to point out in this bizarre way is, this is kind of a new thing I think we can do with AI, right? I mean, it's really hard to do that because everyone's just going to bias everything, and it's going to be a snapshot, right? Like, hey, everything is bad because of X. And then you operate off of that, but things got better already. You know what I mean? Or you look at the markets, because the markets are a great example. They are completely reactionary in every possible way to nothing whatsoever, right? Like, they don't do anything except try to tell the future, and they're wrong most of the time. But if you knew that, right, you could sort of say, like, well, the only way to win is that apparently people seem to always want to do this. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to invest over time. And of course, everyone who does that so far has succeeded, right? Like, you just invest over time and there is no way to tell what's going to happen because it's an imperfect system. But this is a qualitative system, right? It's not talking about your stock price. It's talking about how somebody feels, reacts, a story, a person, a narrative, something of a narrative sort. I
Well,
guess I
mean,
don't really have a question, but anyway,
well,
sorry.
one thing to remember
Mhm.
in the context of what you are explaining is that RAG is fundamentally a search system.
Mhm. Mhm.
It's a wonderful, good search system. It operates on compressed vectors, right? So essentially, you have maybe a reference, maybe you are referencing, a scientific paper in your course. That paper will be chopped into sections
Mhm.
and represented as vectors. The nice aspect of RAG is that some of the RAG systems will kind of have a smart chopping kind of like an algorithm where yes, you are subdividing the document, but every time it's subdivided, the AI creates like a summary of the whole thing. So even though you kind of chopped, everything by page or by section or whatever, there's still going to be a little attachment that is going to be maybe an abstract of the paper, kind of explaining the bigger picture. So that's what you are searching. And the search algorithm itself in that embedding vector space is wonderful. So yeah, just kind of my 3 cents, right? Like
Mm.
you will be able to have a very good conversation with your resources if you are talking to RAG, right? Much better than I mean, so if you have, it doesn't really matter. You don't have to do that if you have maybe just 5 papers
Yeah,
and
yeah,
you
and I
just,
think I'm
yeah,
okay architecturally. I guess that
yeah.
we can talk about it later about what the goals are. They might not learn
Mm,
anything, it might suck, but at least architecturally it will get better, I
mm,
assume. And I think it's already gotten better since everything gets better, right? Like when you're not using it.
mm.
Right. Well, because I think, and maybe we could talk about too, is that certainly there's a lot of people on the inside that are benefiting from using their own tools, right? Because we always said if you're pretty comfortable with computers, these things should be great. If you're not comfortable with installing thermostats, they're pretty good too, but you have to learn how to use them, right? They aren't Google. But Google then would take you to an article of how to install then you'd be back to the old instruction manual mode, right? And that's what I'm saying is I think we're actually inventing kind of a new way to teach because you and I can teach each other because we both now realize, I'm a huge Stanislaw Lem fan, right? Like, that's read all his books as well. I have not read the one you speak of, but now I'm an Echo fan, and he's in the similar vein. Like he's one of those wacky people who is a semiotics guy, and it just like I like semiotics, but I didn't even know such a thing existed until he wrote a book. Like he wrote the book on semiotics, right? Is symbology and what it
Mhm,
means.
mhm,
So fun things that weren't taught to me in school, but I kind of figured out what they're called and why I like them. And here's a thing where I'm trying to do the same with people who have got deep backgrounds in data analysis, something like that, but they don't know the second part, which is now you do the hard part, trying to change somebody's mind based on data. And again, maybe we can talk about it next week because we're out of time. Sorry, Jack.
mhm. Yeah, lots of topics. Yeah.
I guess, but either way, sorry to dominate. I didn't mean to really. I'm very excited about this because I'm just filling out the course, but we'll, till next week.
All right. Until next week. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you, Jack. Cheers.